the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia. Now, the timeline is important to the story here, so I do want to spend a moment just kind of diving into the details of it. At 5 p.m., the hearing began. At 5:22 p.m., the court hearing adjourned for a break. Then, 4 minutes later, 5:26, the first flight carrying non-citizens departed from Texas. At 5:45 p.m., a second flight carrying non-citizens departs from Texas as well. At 6 p.m., the court hearing resumed. Between 6:45 and 6:48 p.m., the judge verbally tells Justice Department attorneys that they need to turn around any planes carrying anyone being deported under this Alien Enemies Act. At 7:26 p.m., the judge's written order is posted and reads in part, as discussed in today's hearing, the court orders that the government is enjoined from removing from the country any non-citizens in U.S. custody who are covered by Trump's proclamation about the Alien Enemies Act. Now, the written order did not specifically include language about turning flights around, which is what the judge had said earlier in court verbally. 10 minutes later, at 7:36 p.m., the first flight carrying non-citizens for deportation arrived in Honduras. At 7:37 p.m., a third flight carrying non-citizens for deportation departed from Texas. Then, at 8:08 p.m., the second flight carrying non-citizens lands in Honduras for a layover and eventually lands in El Salvador later that night. 9:52 p.m., the third flight carrying non-citizens also arrives in El Salvador. Now, those flights were not turned around, clearly. Many of the deportees ended up in El Salvador, whose president, Nayib Bukele, cultivates a strongman image and is now championed by the conservative movement here in America. Early Sunday morning, President Bukele posted this on X, a headline that reads, "Fed judge orders deportation flights carrying alleged Venezuelan gangbangers to return to U.S., blocks Trump from invoking Alien Enemies Act." The president added his own take on it. Oopsie, too late. The post was then reshared by White House Communications Director Stephen Chung and liked by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. About 30 minutes later, President Bukele posted this highly produced video. Deportees from the United States landing in El Salvador, shackled and bussed into the country's infamous terrorism confinement center, which can hold as many as 40,000 inmates in draconian conditions. CNN's David Colbert recently got an exclusive look inside, and I just want to show you some of what he saw.
Suddenly, you're hit with the intense gaze of dozens locking onto you. These men described as the worst of the worst, tattooed with reminders of El Salvador's dark past. It's tense and uncomfortable. But here, officials say comfort isn't meant to exist.
We're going to close the door. I just want to get a sense of... Wow.
Solitary confinement awaits.
The only light you get is through this hole. They can be in here for 15 days, potentially. All right, I'm ready to get out.
As far as President Trump and the very real question of if his administration violated a federal judge's order, he was asked about it last night on Air Force One.
Did the administration actually, speaking of orders, violate Judge Boasworth's order in sending back the Venezuelan gang members and not bringing them back?
I don't know. You have to speak to the lawyers of it.
Are you planning to do more deportations?
I can tell you this, these were bad people. That was a bad group of, as I say, hombres.
Well, today, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was pressed by CNN's Caitlin Collins about the order and the timeline.
There's actually questions about whether a verbal order carries the same weight as a legal order, as a written order, and our lawyers are determined to ask and answer those questions in court.
Well, keep it honest, there is no difference between a verbal and written legal order, and even if there was, that third plane departed for El Salvador even after the written one was filed. That press briefing was early this afternoon. A few hours later, the argument was no longer one of semantics and timing from the White House. It was that this federal judge had no authority to issue the order at all.
The district court has no ability to in any way restrain the president's authorities under the Alien Enemies Act or his ability to conduct the foreign affairs of the United States. This judge violated the law. He violated the Constitution. He defied the system of government that we have in this country.
Well, late today,